We are live. Welcome to BWI Live. I'm Thomas Ryan Carr, Ryan Snyder. It's our recruiting show, and Ryan, there's been a lot of stuff. We haven't been gone all that long, but this is the first time we've been live, you and I, this week. So it's a great time for fans to interact with Ryan, asking some questions here on the show. Fitz is coming home from the beach today, so it'll be just Ryan and I flying solo on this one. Welcome to the show. How you doing this week?
Just want to make it clear, I joined the show from the beach last week. Somebody else isn't today. I'm just taking shots, Sean, taking shots. But no, we're doing good. Busy week, right? I mean, it's been nonstop, but we expected that to be the case. I didn't necessarily see Troy Hume joining, and some other little quick things. But as far as the 2025 class goes, it's about kind of what we expected, man. Was it 5 commitments in 6 days, something like that? We'll see if we have another one coming today. I think it's been 4 straight days of commitments, 5 straight days of commitments. Let's see. We got Jabri on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. Granville was Monday. Troy was Tuesday, and then Jaden Woods yesterday. I think so.
Yep.
Yeah, been a heck of a run, and it's been a lot of fun to follow. And
7 commitments in the last 8 days. If you rewind, basically to the timeline of the last time we were on air, we did cover Antonio Branch last time, but is a pretty impressive run for Penn State football. And what we're going to talk about on the show today, we're going to recap that. We're going to get some news coming out of official visit weekend. Ryan's got a great notebook over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com right now to go read all of those details. If you want to get in on that, get the recruiting information and maybe some of the things we don't even talk about here today, subscribe to the Blue White Illustrated the Blue White Illustrated site, code PSU1, 2 months for $1 gets you access to all of the recruiting information, insider info from Nate, from Greg, from Ryan, and we'll get you film breakdowns, things like that as we head into training camp and the football season. So it's well worth your time to join us over there. We'll also talk about some of the misses. It hasn't all been sunshine and rainbows. There's some tough news for Penn State fans to swallow from regional prospects, either choosing to go somewhere else or not choosing Penn State without having chosen anyone yet. And that's where we're going to start with the show. The latest on Andrew Olesh. Ryan.
Yeah, I don't expect him to end up at Penn State. I think he's going to Alabama or Michigan. I think that's from a in-state perspective and everything Penn State wants to do as far as keeping the top prospects in state. It hurts, especially when you consider how well they've done at tight end. But at the same time, he's consistently made it clear that getting an opportunity to play early has been really important to him. And Penn State's got a heck of a tight end room, right? So, on one hand, you want to keep the best players in state. You know how good of an athlete he is. He's camped at Penn State multiple times. So, the data is there to support that he's going to be at least has all the tools to be a special player. But at the same time, if there's a position or two on that roster right now where you can afford a loss or two like that, it's at tight end for sure. So Matt Henderson, by the way, who has also camped at Penn State now a few times, putting up similar numbers in a lot of ways. So they feel like they got a quality tight end in this class, and he's already a 4-star at 1-3, and I think a few other sites as well. So it's a loss from the perspective of how fans view it, dominate the state, all that kind of stuff, right? But as long as you're able to get a top tight end, which they have, I think Penn State will be okay.
It's interesting because Andrew Olesh is casually 6'5". You're around him, and maybe he doesn't have some of the things. I don't know what it is, but there's something where it kind of sneaks up on you, and then you look and you're like, oh wow, he is actually everything that all the other players that Penn State has recruited are. And you mentioned the testing metrics and the size and all of that stuff. But yeah, Penn State getting just one of the top 5 players in the class of 2025 in state, although one of them was on campus this past weekend who's committed elsewhere. Let's talk about official visit weekend. There's news coming out. There's information about the commitments, which is the obvious win that we'll get to in just a second. But are there any nuggets from this past weekend that you want to share and talk about here on the show that you think are relevant and interesting?
Well, let's see. I mean, a few guys have already committed, right? Max Buchanan's off the board. Cortez Harris, Broswell Thomas, Jabri, Wallace-Coleman. So what's that? 3 hits, 1 miss. Yeah, Zahir Mathis, I think, is the one that a lot of fans will be curious about, want to know about. Obviously, he's committed to Ohio State. let's see where things go. Ohio State has been aggressively adding edge rushers. It's obviously a position that's important to them, but at the same time, does that make Zahir think? And the fact that he was taking an official visit this weekend would make you think that, yeah, he's maybe having some thoughts about looking around or, seeing what other options are out there, just because of how aggressive Ohio State has been and adding, some really good edge rushers to the class. So time will tell with that one. I don't see anything happening in the near future, anything like that. But just getting him on campus,
playing the long game.
Yeah, it's always a win, right? You got to keep chipping away there. They kind of did the same thing with Jabri. I mean, Jabri Wallace-Coleman committed to Georgia. I think it was a year and a half ago. No, more than that. I think it was around July 2022. But look what Penn State did. They got him on campus 2 or 3 times. Came up for, I think it was at least twice when he was committed. I know he was definitely at the West Virginia game, and that's all you can do, right? You just keep chipping away at it. The relationship with him, it's good. They've landed how many players from there in recent years. So from that perspective, it's a positive. But Zahir's kind of always been a little more laid back, just like Jabri, honestly. I mean, they've both been pretty laid back with recruiting as far as like aggressiveness with visits and stuff like that. But at the same time, I do wholeheartedly believe Penn State's going to keep pushing there and be in the mix.
Interesting, because we'll get into, again, some of the changes that have happened even since Mathis was on campus this past weekend to the edge recruiting class and the defensive line in general. The receivers, we're going to get to that in just 1 second, because there were a number of receivers on campus, and there's some of that conversation is going to be dominating the chat, dominating the comment section, and over the next couple of days, there's going to be more talk about the Penn State receiver recruiting. But before we get to that, My Perfect Franchise, that is your next stop in your future. Whether you're ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream, for a side hustle. Maybe you want to leave your current job. Maybe you don't want to leave your current job. Maybe you want to diversify, build wealth, or leave a legacy. My Perfect Franchise and Andy Ludicky, he's a franchise consultant with extensive experience placing people like you with the perfect franchise to manage. That's why perfect is in there. It's not just about slap bang, put you in a situation, and then send you out into the wilderness. He gives you the lay of the land. This is how this process works. This is what the general way of getting into ownership of a business and a franchise means, and finding the right one for you to manage. And that is not just your skill set, it's also your financial situation and your risk tolerance. Whether things are booming in the economy or there's a downturn, it does not matter, because there's always something available and something growing. So if you want to get all in on all of that, check out Andy at My Perfect Franchise, 404-973-9901, Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. Thanks again to Andy for sponsoring our recruiting show. Ryan, the conversation then about the receivers. Is there anything that you think is moving from what happened this past weekend with a couple of guys on campus for official visits? And
you said receivers? Sorry, hold on. I was texting someone at the moment. You said receivers? I apologize.
Yeah, receivers. So there's some guys on campus for the latest 7-on-7, and then, of course, there are official visits this weekend. Everyone wants to know desperately about receivers, so do you have an update on anything in that world?
Jeff Exner tomorrow, right? I mean, I think you start there. You got to get Exner on board. I believe Samari Reed has a commitment date now for the 13th. Corey Sims should be sometime next week as well. I don't see a whole lot going on with Sims, but Samari Reed's July 3rd. So next Wednesday. Reed, I got to get a better feel for. I think a lot of people have kind of. He seems to have a couple schools that are certainly in the mix, and Penn State's one of them, but I got to get a better feel for where he's truly leaning. I think right now you got 4 guys that I'm mainly focused on. I'd say Jeff Exner, Lex Cyrus, Matthew Otten, Taz Williams. I think those are the 4 that will have the majority of my focus. Taz Williams isn't committing till July 13th. So you got 2+ weeks there to go. See where things shake out there. But I do think there's some signs that Penn State's trending well. Of course, he's from Texas, but he has a lot of really strong Pittsburgh ties. Mom still resides in Pittsburgh, I believe. And, he's up in that area a good bit, I know, in the summertime. So Penn State's working that angle with Taz, Michigan, Texas A&M. They're both in the mix there. We'll see. That's still 2+ weeks to go. But like I said, get Exner on board. I think Lex Cyrus will be sometime next week. I would assume. I think he'll be. I thought he would also probably be committed by now, though. So I don't want to overthink it too much. South Carolina's certainly giving him something to think about, but Penn State's being aggressive there as well. So I got to get a better feel on Lex. I mean, Lex was actually one of the guys like I'm really trying to work on this afternoon to dig a little bit on, and we'll take it from there. But Matthew Otten, buddy, anybody's guess right now. I think if anybody pretends they have a great feel for Matthew Otten, you're kind of BSing yourself and others, because it's that may be the hardest recruitment to read of any player in this class at the moment. I do genuinely believe that. He's just always been incredibly quiet. It's always been a lot of second, third hand information, and sometimes that stuff's accurate, sometimes it's not. But I still do believe Penn State, Maryland, Virginia Tech are the three schools. Maybe Penn State and Maryland are emerging a little bit. Heard some talk about that as far as them rising to the top. But I just, at the end of the day, he's been so quiet with not only just the media, but also with coaches that, that's one of those ones that just anything can happen at any time. And fans will just have to keep their eye out.
Any other final thoughts from official visit weekend before we move on to reviewing what happened in the fallout of official visit weekend?
I would say LeVar Arrington II is the other one just to keep an eye on. I think that's always felt like Penn State's going to be in a good position there, obviously with his dad's ties, and his dad is still very much involved around the program, has a good relationship with Franklin and everybody. So that one makes a lot of sense. And then also, if you look at like UCLA and Tennessee, well, both of those schools have ties with different people on the recruiting staff or coaching staff with Penn State ties too. I found that kind of interesting as well, the more I dig on that. But I had that as a UCLA Penn State battle for a while. Then Tennessee gets him on for an unofficial and an official in like a 3-4 week span. So obviously I don't want to rule out a prominent SEC program that's for the most part on the rise in Tennessee. So we'll see where things go with that one. But I do feel like there's a real chance that they could get Arrington, but he's another guy who just kind of keeps to himself a little bit. So when exactly that commitment may come, anybody's guess at the moment. We'll keep chipping away.
So we've talked about all of these commitments over the last couple of days. We started out saying that this has been an impressive run for Penn State football. You can check out each of the individual recaps and videos here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel or bluewhiteillustrated.com. But to take a look at everything in totality, it's been an impressive couple of days. So we're just going to go through the timeline. If you want to run down the days and the players of where Penn State got these commitments, Ryan, I think for just so everyone has so much stuff happened in the last couple of days. Everyone has a timeline of exactly how things went down.
Well, in the month of June, it's six 4-star commitments, 8 total for the 2025 class, right? I think that's a good place to start there. You want to start in the last week or so? Okay. So Branch, obviously.
I mean, it's on the rundown.
Yeah. I don't look at the rundown. You should know that by now, T. Frank. I don't ever look at it. I'm sorry. But I think it's been a good run. From the perspective of, well, you lose Alvin Henderson, but you get another top running back right away. And the timing of that, I think we talked about that a little bit last week, or I put it in a notebook maybe. It was just like the timing of Alvin decommitting was perfect, if that ever makes sense, just because Penn State was going to be in a situation where they kind of, I don't want to say slow play, but you have to maybe you can only give 80% gas, right, on Jabri when he's on campus, because you have to kind of figure things out. Where having him decommit when he did, boy, that was important. And it really allowed them to just go all in. And I think that's why you saw a commitment at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, basically, because not that, wouldn't have came on Sunday or Monday, but it allowed them to say, hey, look, we are all in on you. You know the situation now. And I think Jabri was always very serious about Penn State, but, would they take 4 running backs? Like that was always kind of the slow angle, I guess you'd say.
Was this I think what you're saying is this was a first come, first serve situation where both guys were committable players, both guys that we're talking about are good running backs, but the fact is Alvin Henderson committed a couple months ago and Jabri Wallace-Coleman obviously didn't. So I guess so some people might think one way or the other about preference here, but it seems like it is a very good, if as you mentioned, the way things worked out was good from a time perspective, but also these are comparable prospects. Is that fair?
Well, comparable as far as like they both have a lot of potential. I think they're two different runners, and you would agree with that. But yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's like that for 80% of the commitments that everybody gets, right? I mean, does Penn State turn down guys? Of course they do, because they're not quite on the level that I think Penn State wants them to be. But for any player that they're really pushing for, which for the most part, everybody who takes official visits are guys they really want. Yeah, it's often first come, first serve. Now there are certain guys it's a gray answer, because there are certain guys that of course they're going to hold out for. But those are also usually those kind of +1 guys where you add no matter what. I'm not sure. I think Jabri was very high on the board, but like the +1 was always kind of like 3 running backs to go to +1 as far as 4. That's where it kind of made things a little tricky, I think. So, but anyway, just the timing of that, I think, was massive. And that's why Penn State's able to get that commitment quick. I think Broswell Thomas, 3-star, commits then the following day, that Sunday. He's a guy that from a testing perspective, like he's put up some numbers that stack up well with many 4-star safeties. Is he going to be a 4-star safety in the end? I'm not sure. Let's see how he progresses on film this year, because I think that's a big part of his evaluation. I think he has a lot of impressive film. I think as far as like watching complete game film and stuff like that, there were questions, like Charles had questions, like Penn State staff had questions. But then when he comes up to Penn State in June 2nd, and then literally all of his testing numbers, every single one of them was pretty drastically improved for a year, especially when you're talking about a sophomore to, well, it would have been rising junior to rising senior. Takes off 2/10 on his 40, jumps 2 more feet in the triple broad. Like there are some things there that really popped. And that's why Penn State's able to feel comfortable about that commitment. And, as they learn more about his background and stuff like that too, they feel more confident that he's a player that they can mold long-term, no matter how he performs his senior season. As far as senior season goes, though, that's where rankings and stuff like that will really shake things out. But, right now, if you look at our ratings, I think Broswell's like the second lowest guy in the class. And I'm not sure that Penn State looks at that similarly. I think he would be a little bit higher. Just again, the testing numbers are really impressive. And then you go on a string of 3 straight edge rushers, right? And that was, how many times did we talk about Penn State's defensive line recruiting and how difficult it's been able to read, all that kind of stuff. Well, boom, you get Cortez Harris, who's coming off an injury, but has always had, has shown flashes at times that he can be a quality player. And then of course, Max Granville, I mean, that's maybe the biggest hit of the class so far. And as in my opinion, as far as, player that we always thought they had a chance with, but was he really going to leave? Was he really going to leave, Texas and, not go to Oklahoma like so many expected? And, that one really just came down to like, wow, they feel like this is a perfect fit scheme wise. And it is in a lot of ways, because they like the aggressiveness and the openness that Penn State allows their defensive linemen to play with. It's not, don't get me wrong, they got to cover gaps and do different things, but, they let their guys get after it. And I think that, his dad, first off, his dad played in the NFL, right? He played at Duke back in the day. So like his dad understands football. And I think when he and Max were really drilling down on, where's the best place for you to grow and, reach your potential and maybe reach the NFL one day, they saw that in Penn State's scheme and what Penn State wants to do. So that was really the key with that one. And then with Jaden Woods, man, it really, I feel like, is another guy where, he has some incredible athletic testing numbers, and Penn State just, you can't pass up on some of these guys. So I always kind of wondered if Jaden was a bit of a tweener, but more I've learned, he's certainly an edge guy moving forward.
He might be the biggest guy of the trio you just mentioned in terms of frame and length, which is interesting given, the guys they've had in the last couple of years.
So yeah, we'll see. I feel like they will add another edge if they have to, or if they, they get the opportunity to add somebody they really want. Of course, Zahir Mathis would be the one that I think a lot of fans would circle there, but I think Jaden Lofton, too, who committed to Tennessee, would certainly be a guy to keep an eye on. I do expect Cedric Burks to probably end up at Kentucky. That seems like that's in motion there, but there are going to be other guys too to go down the road. So I wouldn't be shocked if you saw another edge. They only took 2 edges last year and they took 4 defensive tackles last year. So kind of feels like we're going to do the opposite this year, maybe take, 3 edges, maybe 4, and then probably 2 defensive tackles. And we'll see where the D-tackle board goes, because that's still a little bit up in the air, but I do think we're starting to get some answers there, which you can find in my notebook.
Let's camp out here for a second. How much do these last 2 commitments with Granville and Woods, how much do they change your opinion of the class, and maybe not your opinion of Deon Barnes, but the production so far from him in his first full cycle, where there had been such a lag of 0 commitments and now there's 3. Now that there's some evidence to kind of mull over, how do you feel that these 2 commitments affect the class and kind of his progress so far as a recruiter in this class?
Deon's always been a good recruiter. I mean, he's done well. I mean, when he was a GA, like he had a big role in a lot of Philadelphia guys and some national defensive line guys. So like, I never really worried about him as a recruiter. Honestly, I really didn't, because I felt like we got a good understanding for how important he was when he was underneath John Scott and, in that GA role. I think it's a down year for kind of defensive line overall. If you really kind of compare it to the last couple of years. And that's especially true at edge, which is why landing Max Granville is absolutely massive, because he was probably one of their top 1 or 2, maybe with Zahir, maybe 1 or 2 other guys up there. Jaden Woods was certainly up there too. And I think Cortez Harris was certainly up there higher. Then the injury kind of had some people wondering about some things, but they're not going to pass up on a quality player that, could still has a lot of room to grow and potential moving forward. But I never really worried about Deon recruiting wise. I think it was just like they were trying to be selective this year because, again, there's a lot of questions. A lot of guys, even Zahir Mathis has a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And even Max Granville to some degree. I mean, there are questions about a lot of guys compared to maybe some other years. And they got to be selective with that because they know how pivotal of a position it is. And yeah, sure, they can take guys and take chances. They kind of did that with T.A. Cunningham last year, but you don't want to do that regularly. That's not something you want to do. So I think they feel really good about the 3 guys they got in right now, and now it's time to turn the page to defensive tackle. Not completely. There certainly are some edges out there, but they really need to get some quality D tackles on board, and they'll feel a lot better.
It's interesting that we had the conversation over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Somebody was asking about the future of the defensive end position. I think it was a mailbag question that didn't make it in on the Tuesday show. Max Granville, from an athleticism standpoint, he passes the test to belong in that next line of Penn State defensive ends. They've got some guys on the roster currently that needed to develop and were project players, so you don't want to count any of those, the Mason Robinsons and the Vicky McCoys out at this point. But when you're talking about the next guys, as you said, 2 last year with Jalen Harvey, Malachi Williams, now Jaden Woods and Max Granville, I feel like are both on that tier from an athleticism standpoint. So, from a roster building and looking at these things and how they relate to what's currently on the roster, I feel like it was a big answer this week from the Penn State defensive line, which is interesting because we have this conversation all the time of guys in their first recruiting cycle and the white hot spotlight of immediate expectations and immediate returns. And you go back to some of the stuff that happened in the spring with maybe NIL influence decisions from some of those top defensive tackle targets we talked about before we got into official visit season. And I think there was a growing feeling amongst certain Penn State fans that this wasn't going the right way compared to what they were expecting from everything you said about Deon Barnes. And here is, as you said, they're being selective. Here's the result of those labors. And it's quickly how it's interesting how quickly these conversations change once you get the actual information, and how they could continue to change, Ryan, from what you're saying.
It's a massive part of just how the recruiting calendar lines up now. I mean, these official visits, like this month has become the most important month for the current recruiting class, and even to some degree 2026, because you learn so much information. Really, that kind of goes back to April, May with camps and all that stuff. But like this stretch now and the way the recruiting calendar works, like this is, you kind of get to that tipping point where you really have to just make decisions and you really start learning answers. So it's a little bit of everything. Sure, yeah, Penn State had a dozen plus guys committed before then, but the way this was all setting up it was absolutely going to be a massive month of June, and that's when we knew we were going to get a lot of answers. Penn State getting Max Granville is absolutely massive. Jaden Woods massive. Cortez is massive. They feel good about that situation. And hey, they can still add another edge. Like I would not be shocked at all if they get another one.
How do you feel about where the class sits from? I think it's just outside the top 10. It might be 12th right now in the on-three industry ring.
Yep.
11th?
11th.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
That's what I thought. I guess not without predicting the final commitments in this class, do you think they stay in that ballpark, or do you think they're gonna trend back to where they were as other top prospects make their decisions? You know, we mentioned the Andrew Olishes of the world and Ty Jacksons and other players that are on Penn State's radar that are national prospects. Do you think that they'll stay there, or will they get leapfrogged by other programs, I guess, generally in that ballpark?
I still look at this probably a little bit closer to a top 15 class. A lot of it's just going to depend on how some of their 3-stars, some of the lower rated guys move up.
Right.
I mean, that's going to be a massive part of it. We talk about that all the time, but like camp information will be big. That's got to get digested between, we obviously know what Penn State's guys are doing, but I'm not exactly sure where, some of these other guys are testing right now. And that's for Charles and the scouting staff to figure out. But I also think the other big thing is like, okay, when you look at On3's rankings, we've talked about this before, they basically narrow it down to the cumulative average of the Power 4 schools, and that's a rolling average that grows, right? So that's why Penn State's 11th right now when, 24/7 rivals, what are they, 6th?
Yep.
Yeah,
Eric had that exact question here in the chat.
This is what I'm explaining, Eric. So look, I'll be very honest with you. Like this is the right way to rank. And I felt like this when I pounded my chest when we were at Rivals that like I hated the way Rivals was ranking guys. And 24/7 is similar. It's just a total point accumulation. That's why Rutgers is like top 10 right now. It makes no sense. That's not going to be the way it finishes. The way we're doing this now is we're trying to give you a better feel for like, okay, this class is legitimately on pace to finish somewhere in that 11-15 range where like Penn State's not going to finish 6th. That's not going to happen. It's because it's honestly, not to be disrespectful, but I think an antiquated way to rank schools. But to get back to On3's, when you look at the way On3's rankings shake up right now, USC has 12 commits. Tennessee has 15. Michigan has 12. Texas has 12. Florida State only has 6. Those are the 5 schools behind them right now. So they are obviously, those are all prominent schools. They're going to stack talent. And that's why I still feel like Penn State will drop a bit down, closer to that 15 range. But again, at the same time, Penn State has 10 3-star guys right now. And you can make a case that a handful of them, have a real argument to be bumped up. And maybe they won't be 4-star guys, but higher 3-star guys, they matter. They generally do. Like Broswell Thomas is ranked 746 right now in the On3 industry rankings.
Right.
The dude just put up some athletic numbers that are pretty impressive. And I feel I know Charles and our staff well enough to know that those numbers are going to grab their attention. I mean, Owen Alcine, like we already at On3, we already have him as a 4-star player, but he's like Penn State loves Owen. Like they feel like he is a genuine offensive tackle prospect. That's why we have him at number 211 in the On300, where I think like On3 has him. I'm looking at this now. On3 has him as the 17th ranked offensive tackle. 24/7's 44, ESPN's 49, Rivals is 68. Like that's gonna those other sites will likely catch up at some point. I'm not saying they're gonna have him at 17, but they're gonna bump him up, and that's gonna move Owen up a good bit, probably into a 4-star range. So and there are certainly.
Can I jump in here just to kind of explain too that there's different ways that we slice this. So even within On3, there is the On3 industry ranking, which, as you're pointing out, is the composite of what everyone else is doing, as opposed to
that's what we use for the team rankings.
Ranking.
Let me clarify that. Yeah, let me clarify.
Yeah, so that's why we have those differences and discrepancies. Sometimes people want to be like, gotcha, and say like, hey, it's a 3-star here and a 4-star here. This is the difference of trying to understand that we don't know everything. So On3 has an opinion of Owen Alcine, who is a 4-star top 300 player, but whether there's a lag from the other recruiting services or there's a split in opinion, because there's a split in opinion on a lot of guys in this particular class. I wrote about it this week at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Some guys that are wild cards are undervalued players. This is where those things kind of change. And Ryan, this is where all that gets hammered out in the final rankings in December. January, really, February with the final recruiting weekend, but really the early signing period in December. So I guess that's I'm not asking a question, I'm just throwing an opinion your way, but I guess here's the question. How do you view these things interim when you're trying to understand the context of recruiting service differences?
Look, everybody has their opinions. I mean, that's the place to start, but this time of the year, especially because April, May, June is when you get the vast majority of camps. I mean, if you go down south, yeah, sure, there were some camps in February and March in LA and Florida, but like we have now all that information from Under Armour, from All 22, from Elite 11, from all these different places. And like this is where now having a lot of that information, you're going to start seeing some bigger changes being made in these rankings. So I can't speak for what 24/7, ESPN Rivals, all those guys are going to see from those. I feel like at On 3, we have a pretty good. I think we have it pretty well rated right now. I really honestly do. And I'm not a company kind of kiss ass kind of guy. I'm really not. And I feel like I've always kind of made that clear. I probably shouldn't say that kind of stuff, but like I generally, if I feel like this is the right or this is wrong, like I'll let you know that. But I really wholeheartedly believe like Lyric Samuel, we have him rated really damn high. He should be rated really damn high. Owen Alcina, we have him pretty high. Like I feel like there's a lot of discrepancies that others will catch on to with time. And Matt Zollers was a great example. I know we don't want to talk about Matt Zollers on this podcast. Fans get a little annoyed with, but like we saw him very early. Charles got on him very early, and now he's rated so high on all these other sites. So that'll come. And hey, I'm not saying On 3 is perfect too. I mean, there will be guys that On 3 has high that'll drop a little bit. The one thing I will add is like, so you guys don't have access to this. We have access to this. But like if you were just looking at On 3's rankings and how it goes through the team rankings right now, Penn State would be 9th. 11th, 9th. There's not a big difference there. But, just looking at On 3's, that Penn State would be 9th. It would be a little bit higher. So I feel, again, and that's where I come back to Lyric Samuel, Owen Alcine, Broswell Thomas to some degree. I don't know if Broswell is going to end up a 4-star everywhere, but those testing numbers will get out and they will impact his rating. There are quite a few guys there that I feel like are due for some quality moves up into, if not a 4-star, certainly higher 3-star for Broswell for sure.
And just to show everybody what he's talking about here is the you can even see it's broken down by the different recruiting services and they're ranked, I believe, here by their industry ranking. And some of Penn State's, the guys that are very high on Penn State's how they feel about him. Matt Henderson split on whether he's a 4-star, 3-star by some of the services, but also, just outside the On 300 in the industry ranking. And just to show what you were talking about with Braswell Thomas, with some of these guys down here at the bottom, here they are with different recruiting rankings. Where is Lyric Samuel? There he is. That's who I was looking for. Lyric Samuel, 180 versus unranked by 2 of the recruiting services here.
Yeah. That's going to change, man. I mean, he had a very good Elite 11. He had a good showing at Under Armour. Like that's just a matter of time until, Rivals and 24/7 updates him to some degree. I don't know that they're going to make him, the 24th best wide receiver in the country, but I mean, right now he's 129 at 24/7. Like there's no way that lasts. No way.
So I wrote about this week of the wild cards in this recruiting class, identifying a couple of the players that have unique situations for one reason or another. And one of the guys that we just put up there, DeShawn Bernett, I'm just curious, what's your opinion of, there are 3 guys in this edge class. You said they might try to add another, only one linebacker after DJ McClary decommits this week. Another part of the conversation we haven't really gotten to yet. What do you feel, I guess, where do you see him as a player in this class from a positional standpoint and from what you think he projects to at the next level?
I just kind of have him as that athlete tab right now. Like I do think he'll be an edge long term. Wouldn't be shocked if he comes in and plays linebacker initially, or at least they give him a shot at that just to see how he moves and they can get a better read on what kind of an athlete he is. Maybe his first semester or 2 on campus. But I do think he'll be an edge long term, and that's why I'm very curious to see how hard Penn State goes for Zahir Mathis and Jaden Lofton, some of those other guys down third. I think DeShawn's a very good athlete. Honestly, I've always thought DeShawn Bernett could be a pretty good tight end. And I've had multiple people bring that up to me just because of his what's the best way to put it? Personality, or like there's been times where you watch his film and like you want him to get after it more on defense, right? Like
yes,
the best defensive players,
100%.
Like they go.
Yes.
And that's not always been DeShawn, but like when you watch some of his tight end film, I just had his coach send me a clip the other day of him making like this nice, really athletic one-handed catch in 7-on-7.
Yeah.
Like I've just always thought, man, don't completely rule that out. Don't get me wrong. I don't think Penn State's really going to make that move or anything like that. But the point is he is a good athlete and can be used in multiple ways. I think Penn State wants to see how he grows this senior season, and that'll help them kind of figure out where they want to slot him long term, whether it's linebacker or not. Again, I could see linebacker to start, but I still feel like his frame, he does good.
He's already 215. I mean, we saw him
Right.
at up close at Penn State's first 7-on-7. He's massive. And
Mhm.
to your point, I guess the thing I'm curious about his senior season is, does he have a position? And has he been able to learn said position? Because he was truly splitting time between an edge rusher and off-ball linebacker. And I guess what I chalked it up to in those situations is, does he know enough to play instinctively? Like, has he learned
Mhm.
any one position enough to be aggressive? And some guys aren't. Like, let's be clear, some guys just never get there on that particular spectrum of aggressiveness and instinct to play defense. But a lot of times that's obscured by, I remember our conversation about Abdul Carter. When he first started playing linebacker, is like, yeah, he looks athletic, but I never see it on film because he's never really going all out. And then suddenly his
Mhm.
senior year, it all clicks. And now he's a 6'3", 235, 240-pound linebacker in high school, flying all over the field. And some of those things, it takes time to unlock. And that's kind of the variability with DeShawn Bernett that I'm super curious about, and how he fits long term. And everything you just said, how does understanding football fit into that context? Who's interesting to you in this class? Like, who are the players that you find most fascinating for whatever reason?
Lyric is certainly the guy. I've thought that for a long time, and yeah, now on 3 has him rated pretty highly and all that, but like, dude, the guy came to Penn State as a sophomore and ran like a 4.5 at what's his size, like 6'3".
Six,
Like, I mean,
basically
there's
6'4". Yeah,
6'4". Yeah, I mean, yes, he needs to add to his frame. I'm not saying he's going to always be a burner or anything like that, but like, how many times have we talked about, Penn State needing size and impact players at that wide receiver room? I'm not projecting any kid who comes from, Brooklyn to come in, and that's no shot at like New York City football or anything. Well,
yeah.
I guess it kind of is to some degree, but my point is just like, he's not playing some of these elite IMG kind of high schools where he's playing
Right.
the nation's best of the best. And, we know he's getting in has a strength trainer coach that, could play at or could be at a college or something like that. Like, from that perspective, he'll need time, but like, man, the potential for Lyric Samuel is through the absolute roof. And I really will stress that until we see otherwise, put it that way. And I like Thomas a lot. Broswell really stood out to me at that first camp. Like, that was, I didn't even know he was there. And I'm like, man, I know I recognize this kid. He's got really good size. Like, who is this guy? I finally figured it out. And then once I really started watching him more, I mean, he was dominant in so many different drills. And like, he's just a great example of a player who, like, yeah, he could always been a power 4 guy, probably lower tier, right? Like, I'm not trying to name schools, but we all know who those schools are, right? They're not quite on that Penn State tier, but he's got a lot of potential. But this is a great example of a guy who's just put in the work, man. He clearly has put in the work, has gotten so much better as a safety prospect, has gotten so much better as an athlete. And, when I see those kind of things, from a junior year now going to senior year, like, that's very encouraging, because I feel like this is a guy who something has clicked with him. And now if he can continue that going into when he gets to college, like, he's kind of one of those guys that could really probably hit the floor running. But, a lot of guys, man, I still, I love Alex Tash. I love Jameer Joseph. I mean, they're some of the higher rated guys. I think Penn State fans know what they bring. But, to me, Samuel and Broswell Thomas, like, those are 2 guys that really should probably move up at some point.
Before we get into the looking ahead to the commitments coming up, let's talk about one of the things that didn't go Penn State's way this week. And I talked about this. This was a topic of conversation yesterday because it had happened the night before. But Brandon Finny deciding to go to Oregon over Penn State. I know you were a part of heavily investigating this particular recruitment and the McDonough guys in general. So what's your take on how things played out with Brandon Finny?
It's a big loss because, how many times we talk about him being one of the best athletes in the area. I mean, I when that all took place, I think I tweeted out that I thought he could be a top 75, top 50 national prospect when it's all said and done, just because of how impressive his spring, summer, all that camp season stuff went. Especially if I've learned more too. I mean, I didn't realize that this was his first year. This past year was his first year playing corner. And, obviously I saw him at Under Armour and was like, holy crap, physically this guy's kind of ready to make a impact. I'm not sure right away, but I wouldn't be shocked if he gets on the playing field, in 2025. I mean, I think he's that physically gifted in so many ways. But look, I think Penn State will continue to chip away at this one. It hurts without a doubt. I mean, this was a guy that they had. I'm not going to say they had him penciled in because they knew obviously they're going against Oregon, Ohio State, and some elite programs.
They had the pencil in their hand, right? So they didn't have him penciled in, but the pencil was definitely in their hand.
Yeah. So look, Oregon is a premier program, guys, and Penn State's going to have to deal with this moving forward. I'm not sure if it'll be more than normal. I mean, Penn State's always had a couple battles with Oregon every year, and that's not something that's really new. We've seen that going for a while, but Dan Lanning has everything that you could ever want if you're a major college football program at his disposal there. And that allows him to go wherever he wants across the country to find top players. And, Oregon's going to be a top program this year. They're going to be a top program next year. They have everything you can want from an NIL perspective. They got the total package, guys. They really wholeheartedly do. And they're now joining the Big Ten.
So they're out of the shadow of the Pac-12 TV deal, which was generally holding down that conference because
and they're not going to get
revenue.
Money for a while though. Yeah. Like the way the new schools are added, I mean, they're not getting nearly what Penn State and some of these other schools are getting for at least the foreseeable future. I forget how many years it was, but it doesn't, like, Oregon doesn't matter. Like, that matters at UCLA, that matters at Washington to some degree. With Oregon and USC, that doesn't matter nearly as much. Like, they will be just fine. They will have everybody at their disposal to make sure that program's clicking on all cylinders, and especially in the 12-team playoff now, it only has more people excited. So Oregon will be just fine until they do get that full lump sum, and then who knows what will happen after that. But this really comes down to, like, yes, I think Oregon is more aggressive NIL. I think that's part of it. I also feel like Oregon's a hell of a program right now, and they came in and they got a big win. But I also feel like if you think Penn State's going to just sit back and let that go, like, they're going to absolutely keep chipping away at not only a guy from Maryland, but a guy from McDonough. I mean, this is the first real loss that they've had from McDonough really since PJ Mustard. I can't think of any other guy like Mason Robinson. I thought they were going to lose. Obviously, they flip him back then.
Yeah.
And, sure, there have been guys like here and there that they've offered at times from McDonough, but like when it comes to guys that they've really pushed all out for, this is the first one they've lost, and they're not going to just sit back and let that go.
So now that we're here at the end of the show, let's take a look forward. Some of this we've already discussed, but I just want everyone to have a visual of it, of the upcoming commitment dates that we know of that are, at least at the time of me making these graphics, had been announced, and we're ready to discuss with Penn State prospects about to make a decision with a date. So can you run us down the guys that are coming up over the next 2 weeks or so?
Yeah, so I've added 2 more to the list since you have made that graphic. So I'm going to go through all 6 of them real quick. I know you probably only have 4 of them on there. So Jeff Exner, of course, is Friday. It's massive. We talked about him at the beginning of the show. I think Penn State's in a good spot there. I put an RPM pick today. Honestly, I could have put an RPM pick 6 months ago, and I probably would have felt just as fine about it because of that Kenny Sanders relationship. I think if it's kind of out there publicly now, but something we've discussed more on premium message boards is something that people don't know about is, one, Kenny Sanders is from McDonough. I think a lot of fans know that. He went to McDonough. There's always been a great relationship there. It's a big reason why Penn State's had the success they've had. But on top of that, Kenny was actually very, very, very close with his late uncle. And because of that, I mean, his relationship with Jeff's parents goes back, we're talking decades. We're talking well before Jeff was a prospect. And I felt like that's always like, you're telling me that Kenny Sanders is going to lose out on a guy from McDonough, but not only a guy from McDonough, but someone he has, close ties to. Like, that's always been like, no way. I can't see that happening. And of course, that's not just on Kenny, right? Hagens and Franklin and the whole recruiting staff are involved there. But to me, like, that's one of those personal ones where, like, man, I can't see that getting away. And I still feel pretty good about it. Like I said, I put in RPM today. Maryland was making a pretty aggressive, hard push. But I know Penn State has since, had 1 or 2 conversations with his family. I feel like that should go Penn State's way tomorrow. So feel good about that one. Corey Sims is Monday, June 30th. It'll be 4 p.m. Eastern time. By the way, Jeff Exner's 7 p.m. tomorrow night, guys. So think of me when you're out to dinner, when I'm sitting at my home working at 7 p.m. tomorrow
and it actually comes out at 9.
Yeah, that's don't get me started on the Jaden Woods thing yesterday, but all because of a graphic. But anyway, so Corey Sims, I don't I don't know how hard Penn State's pushing with Corey. Like I felt like for a while they were, and I feel like that's kind of died down a little bit here in recent weeks. So I kind of would still lean towards him ending up elsewhere, but he is part of their top 3. I think the favorite is certainly Missouri, but time will tell. With Samari Reed, man, I like I said, kind of in the beginning of the show, like Samari has always been quiet. He's never been a big go in recruiting as far as all these different visits and, just talking to the media and opening up about things. It's made it kind of difficult at times to get a firm read on what Samari Reed is thinking. I know Clemson has been talked about with Samari at times, whether that's absolutely going to be the case or not. I'm not exactly sure. I do feel pretty good that Penn State will be top 3 or so. We know Ole Miss, West Virginia, Kentucky are the other 3 schools that are, in his top 5. But like this is like Samari Reed is higher on Penn State's board than I think probably we talk about, just because there's just so many receivers. Like, what is higher on the board? Like, I mean, even if he's like,
he's also a hard one to read. I feel like too, from
quiet. Yeah.
But from a film perspective, I look at it and I go, he's obviously better than a lot of these guys that he's playing against. And then the question always creeps into my mind of then, okay, what are the athleticism numbers? And this is kind of the general feel I have for this class overall is there's a lot of missing pieces from these out-of-region prospects or guys that didn't camp or guys that haven't gone to where we have some hard numbers on them, which is a lot of, again, as you mentioned, what we rely on in the recruiting process to make an apples-to-apples comparison because of that talent threshold that you're playing against. And some of the things he does on film are not exactly translatable. Like there's not a ton of positional skills that make you feel like, okay, this guy has X, Y, and Z that I feel comfortable about. There's just a lot of variables there. So it's interesting when people who know more than me, you give these little drop these little information pieces of like, he's higher than you'd think. And I'm like, well, that answers some of those questions then.
Well, that was the answer coming out of his unofficial visit, which it was either January or the end of February. I forget which weekend he came, during that January kind of contact period. But he really made a strong impression on the men. And then, like, put it this way, at a Kobe Howard who visited this past weekend, Nashawn Montgomery who visited this past weekend, like I absolutely would have Samari Reed at the top of those 3 guys. And then again, we've talked about Exner and Lex and Otten, and Taz Williams is now kind of creeping into that discussion. So is he right up there with those 4? I'm not exactly sure. Maybe he would kind of be a little bit, maybe that next tier, but like he's not one of those bottom guys for sure. Right. I mean, how many guys did they bring in on official visits, right? It was like 11 or something like that. So yeah, I kind of have him in that mid pack right now. And again, just the feedback was, again, really good official visit, good family. Like there's a lot of things off the field that fit Penn State well too. And I think that's part of the reason why, they're serious about him. So, but again, he's committing next Wednesday. Like, I think we'll have an answer for Cyrus by then. I hope, because I just want to get that one over with and see where that goes. We'll definitely have an answer for Lex for Jeff and Corey Sims. But, we'll see. I do feel like if Samari Reed next Wednesday is serious about coming to Penn State, they will probably have enough wiggle room still where they can seriously take him and not slow play anything. So I do think they're that serious about him. Just going to the next couple guys, like Jaden Blair. Next Friday, July 5th, I think he's going to Notre Dame. There's nothing that came out of this visit that made me think Penn State's going to be the school. I can go all day on it. We can talk about this, that, and the third, but at the end of the day, I think he's going to be a part of the Irish. So we'll see where that's going. And then the next 2 really aren't for a while. July 13th for Taz Williams and July 18th for Yarquez Carter. So like both of those guys, with them being 2+ weeks out, like there are so many dominoes that are going to fall, so many schools that I don't want to overthink them. I think the feedback right now on Carter and Williams is that Penn State absolutely has a real shot at both. But again, like it's so far to go. Schools are going to miss on guys. They're going to come back more aggressive for whether it's NIL offers or whatever it may be. Like there's just so many variables that can play out for a commitment that's 2 weeks more than 2 weeks away for Taz.
Either guy for Taz specifically, what you just laid out over the next 5 days, there might be a lot of movement in the Penn State receiver room. Is that a situation where there would be some pressure for them to either make his decision earlier, or is he in a position where he has enough options that even if Penn State is 1A or 1B, he would still have an option where he can wait and make his decision later?
I think wide receiver is an important enough position where he can probably get to that watermark of July 13th and still be a take. I mean, they would have to be at like 26 or 20. Like they would have to land, I don't know, multiple guys that, I don't really see happening at the moment and get that class to 26 or something like that for them to think about it more. But I just feel like wide receiver is an important enough position where, like, if you are going to take 5 guys or +1, how we kind of look at things, it's a good year for Taz Williams as far as what Penn State needs and things like that. So we'll see. But again, it's July 13th. Like, that's so far down the radar for me right now. Like, I'm just trying to figure out where we're going to be next Thursday. What is that? Is it next Thursday, July 4th? I think it is.
Yes.
Where we're going to be next Thursday as far as this class goes, because I can still see quite a few guys making moves. And then just real quick with Carter, like, this was always the one where it's like, okay, if Ohio State really wants him, I feel like he could probably end up there. If Ohio State's not pushing too hard, this feels like a Miami-Penn State battle. And I feel like Penn State can absolutely get him if Ohio State doesn't go all in. And right now, I've heard mixed feedback. Like, feedback from Penn State sources, like, the kid seems to be making it clear that Ohio State's in there. But then I've talked to some Ohio State people, and they're like, I'm not so sure about that. So it's kind of that's another gray area right now. And
Depends
another
on where
reason
you're
why.
sitting.
Yeah, well, just another reason why, like, okay, we're talking about a July 18th commitment. Like, a lot has to shake out with Ohio State. A lot has to shake out with Miami. A lot has to shake out with Penn State for us to get a better read on that. And I think so much will over the next, 22 days or whatever it is until he's set to announce. So long way to go.
All right. Well, that's what we got for today on the BWI Live Show. Ryan Snyder dropping all kinds of great stuff here. If you've enjoyed the show and enjoyed the conversation, you can get more of it. His Inside Lash notebook is up right now, code PSU1. I'll put the link to that in the description of the video here once we get off air so that you don't have to go far to find it. But the best way to get to it, code PSU1, 2 months for $1. You get inside access to premium content, the message board, all of that stuff to get you the good stuff from Blue White Illustrated. Ryan, any last thoughts? Anything you want to give people send out the door today?
As of now, I'm not preparing for a commitment today. And every other day this week, we work preparing for a commitment by now. So maybe it'll be us of that streak will end. We'll see. But we've gotten some calls pretty quickly the last couple of days where it's like, hey, might want to keep an eye on this person. So we'll see where that goes. There's certainly some guys we didn't even hit on, like Randy Adarica from South Florida, and Rashad Johnson too is another guy we didn't really hit on this podcast that I think Penn State's in the mix with. So there's a lot. I mean, there's still 12. There's probably about a dozen guys for 5-6 spots. A lot more dominoes still to fall.
All right. Well, we will be following that, chronicling it here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel with our committed series. And of course, any other news that breaks, any other conversations we have. That's it for this week's live shows. We'll be back next Tuesday. We'll have to see what we haven't even talked about this. I don't know that we're going to be doing a live show on the 4th of July. I don't know if Ryan and Fitz will have all their fingers.
If I can replace this water with a beer, I'm in. But don't judge me, right? Because then by next Thursday, I'm going to need a beer at 11 o'clock. So,
All right. Well, we'll get to all that coming up next week. And until then, we'll talk to you later.